evening, everyone. Welcome back to the 1 Hour series. My name is Julia Gorban, and tonight we have a producer on our streams. Her name is Erica Rotstein, and she's a New York-based producer, theater producer to specify, and also a talent manager, and actually a lot more than that, also a business owner and an educator. So tonight we will be doing a draw for a special Producing 101 course. I'll let Erica talk a little bit more about the course and also her journey as a producer, so you guys know what kinds of questions to ask her. Now, in order to enter the draw, for those who usually watch, you know how this works. We ask you questions such as, what is your favorite musical? Or what is your favorite play? What is your dream role? So simple questions like that. And every time you answer a question, put down your answer in comments under this video. You get entered into the draw, and then at the end of the stream, Erica will pick a number, and whoever that number is the lucky winner of the Producing 101 course. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Erica. Hello, Erica.
Hi, Julianne.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
First time having a producer on one of these streams. It's amazing. Now,
honored to fill that seat.
I expect, well, I mean, there are a lot of people who submitted a lot of questions in advance, so I already know we're going to be asking you a lot of things tonight. So for those of you who are watching, make sure to put down your questions and comments as soon as you can if you'd like your questions answered on this stream, because we do only have about an hour. And Erica, could you tell us more about yourself and what you do, and also the the Producing 101 course that one person will win in the draw, and for those who don't win, how they can access that if anyone's interested.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julia. Hi, everyone. So as Julia mentioned, I wear a bunch of hats. I work as a producer, and my work primarily to date has been in the theater medium, although I am now sort of exploring some film projects and some podcast projects, because I tend to be a producer who is inspired first and foremost by the artists I work with. And so while my primary medium is theater, and while the arena where I feel most adept and skilled is theater, I do find myself sort of following artists into other medium as their dreams move there. My lead producing project was an off-Broadway musical called 100 Days. It ran at the Public Theaters Under the Radar Festival, and then had a run at New York Theater Workshop in 2017. And then we produced a small national tour that kicked off at La Jolla Playhouse out in California. And so that's my sort of big lead producing project to date. I've worked as an in-house producer at a number of different institutions, most recently at a company called Broadway Across America, where I was their in-house producer and largely, frankly, managed an investment portfolio of investments in Broadway shows. If you Google Broadway Across America or put it into IBDB, which is like the IMDb for Broadway, you'll see that they are above the title producers on many, many, many projects. And it was through my independent producing work that I found myself sort of moving into talent management. So when I started pursuing independent projects and developing relationships with artists, I realized pretty quickly that what I was really interested in was thinking about the big scope of an artist's career, and really getting to know an artist and become sort of a partner to them in their work. And that realization kind of led me to the desire to explore talent management. So I have two sort of official clients, I guess 2.5. Drew Gasparini, Abigail and Sean Bankson, who actually were the writers and creators of 100 Days. And my half a client is Diana O, who I've just recently started working with, but I think she would be happy for me to say that out loud, because we're still sort of navigating what that relationship will look like. And frankly, it was through my work, both producing and as a talent manager, that my focus of management side is on writers. Those are all composers and writers. And the more I worked with, very closely with artists, the more I realized just how little about the business of the business is really ever shared with artists, right? Like there tends to be this sort of like iron curtain that exists between those of us who identify first and foremost as business folk in the theater industry and those who identify first and foremost as artists. And there tends to be a lack of transparency. And so what happens is the producers and their business folk and team members, right, make a decision about a project and sort of levy that decision down. And it directly impacts the artists and their work and what they're creating and how they are creating it. And there's never actually a conversation about the factors that went into that decision. I said that very as though that is an absolute. Of course, that is not an absolute. There are producers who do take pains to have those conversations and sort of act with more transparency, but it definitely isn't the default in our industry. And so it was in noticing that, it was in sitting on the subway with Drew Gasparini and having him turn to me and be like, so I hear everyone talking about how rich Lin-Manuel Miranda is getting off of Hamilton, but like, how exactly is that happening? Like, where does an author actually make their money? And I was like, oh, nobody's ever even explained to you like what your author contracts look like, right? That sort of sparked the impetus on my part to start teaching. And I talked to 3 incredible women who were my colleagues and friends within the industry, Rachel Sussman, Heather Shields, and Dana Lerner, and sort of shared this interest and the spark I had to this desire to start teaching how the business side of the business works for artists. And it turned out that they all shared that passion. And in 2019, we bounded together, the 4 of us, and we started what we now call the Business of Broadway, or because the acronym is BOB, we lovingly refer to it as Bob, and refer to ourselves as the Bobsies. And we started the business in the fall of 2019, teaching in-person classes in New York City. And we were primarily targeting artists because of, again, this reason d'etre for the business was to help raise that curtain between the business folk and artists. And what's interesting is as COVID, as we moved online with the hit of COVID, it wound up enabling us to really open the conversation and to be available to lots of people, folks who are not necessarily located in New York, folks who perhaps don't even work in the theater industry, but are just fans and want to understand how it works. So now we find that our classes are really made up of a mixture of working artists, working producers who are sort of earlier in their career and looking to learn or looking to transition into producing, and folks who really are just fans and friends of the industry and want to understand how it works. And in addition to sort of increasing transparency and raising that curtain, it's also offered us a really fertile environment for sharing knowledge about how the industry has historically operated and creating space within the groups of students who come through our metaphorical Zoom doors to have conversations about how the industry might operate better, right? To interrogate how the industry has historically operated and really think about what are the ways in which we can actually make the business operate better from a financial standpoint and through an equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism lens. What are the ways in which we can sort of throw away old defaults and norms in favor of new ways of approaching how we do what we do? I realize I've been talking for a bit, but I want to make sure to also touch upon the Producing 101 class that Julia, you mentioned.
Of course, yeah. That's important because it's our draw for today. Plus, people who are watching this stream are obviously interested in getting into producing. So please take all the time you need to explain what the course is about.
Thank you. So the Business of Broadway, rather, we offer, I think at this point we have 5 active curriculum that we offer. And our sort of entry level, our baseline curriculum is Producing 101. It's a 2.5-hour course where we cover everything from some foundational a foundational lesson on sort of who are the players, what are the roles on the administrative side of a creative process, as well as like some basic terminology. Then we talk through the creative life cycle of a show. So from like the spark of creation all the way through development and up until opening on Broadway, if that's where your show is headed, what does the development life cycle of that piece look like? And then we do our final section is focused on the numbers and the finances. So looking at some sample budgets and talking about how the financial picture for a show headed to Broadway works and what it looks like. We do default to Broadway, not because we think every show is destined for Broadway. As I mentioned, my personal lead producing credit actually was not a Broadway show, but because Broadway is the biggest and most expensive of the options, that tends to be the lens through which we teach. And so the draw this evening is to be able to have a free seat at one of our upcoming Producing 101 classes. We teach it sort of the first week of every month. And if you were interested in learning more, our website is thebusinessofbroadway.com. And we actually are teaching while I suggest taking Producing 101 first, we have a class, not this week, but next week, we're teaching our Unions and Guilds curriculum, which is a deep dive into the 15 unions and guilds that operate on Broadway.
Oh, that is actually very interesting, because I've been wanting to get, someone from equity, but then I was like, how do I get someone on these streams who can talk about all the unions? And I didn't know you guys offered a course in this. So for those of you who requested a stream like that, now you have a whole course to explain all the unions. This is perfect.
Or I'll have to connect you. Of our team, Heather is really the best repository of that information, because she works.
The union person, yeah.
Yeah, she works as a general manager, so she just knows that one step better than me, who doesn't work as a general manager. And so perhaps we'll just have to get Heather on the stream with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving all those details. Now for you guys watching, you know what kinds of questions you can ask. And if we don't get to your questions today, I promise, as always, I take down everybody's questions that didn't get answered and try to put them into the next stream. Now, first question for the draw, before I forget, let's start with an easy one. If you'd like to enter the draw, answer the following in comments. What is your favorite musical ever? And once again, just comment below this video, and I'll be taking down everybody's names. Now for Erica, before we dive into the producing side of it, some of the actors had the specific question about what do producers do at auditions, or if you're ever present at auditions or play any part in the casting process, what is that part?
Absolutely. It's a great question. The honest truth is that there isn't one answer to that question, because it depends a little bit on who you are, who the producer is, what the makeup of the creative team is, and what the project is. But generally, it is the creative leaders of the room. So certainly the director. If it's a dance-heavy show and the audition is for a dance-heavy role, then perhaps the choreographer or the movement director, right? If it's a musical, then perhaps the music director. So sort of who are the heads of the creative arenas, if you will, that within the show, as well as the writers. Ultimately, they are the ones who really decide casting. Frankly, in the Bob School of Thought, as we like to call it, when we teach creative development, we don't necessarily talk about casting specifically, but one of the things we talk about that I personally think applies to casting as well is that, my personal approach to producing is not to necessarily be the one in the room all the time, sitting alongside the writers or the director while they do their work. I really see the role of a producer as being able to maintain more of a bird's eye view, and being able to sort of be the more relatively objective eye among the team. And so similarly, that's what I view a producer's role in casting as well. And that's the seat I have taken when I have been in the casting process, which is I am present, but I'm there to provide the bird's eye view considerations, right? I'm not there to necessarily dictate casting choices or to try and exert an override over the instincts of the creative leaders in the room, like the director and the writers. But if I think that there is perhaps a consideration that hasn't been looked at around a casting choice, right? I'm there to sort of be an extra sounding board and to maybe provide the extra thoughts or opinions that might not have already been brought up as it relates to casting choices. But it means that a lot of my job, frankly, is to support the reactions and the feedback of the creative team and how they respond to your performance as in your audition. And so I generally just try to be the happy, supportive face in the room. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it does come down to the director. Let's say it was a show that also required circus skills, right? Like I'm working right now on a musical that's set in the circus, right? Then you would actually also want your circus brain, right? Whether it's a circus movement director or whomever is that central brain. You would want them in the room as well to assess the skills, right? But at the end of the day, it really is those creative team leaders and the writers who really make those creative decisions. And my job as a producer is only to be available to help refine those choices when I feel that's needed.
All right. Well, I think before I was going to ask you another question that someone asked, but I think the question might be answered if we talk about what producers actually do. So before we talk about that, though, let me ask the next draw question. Another one I ask a lot, but just to see who we have watching tonight. What is your dream role in theater? It could be a musical or a straight play, or if you're a film actor, it could be a role in a film, and a film that's already been produced and is already out there is fine too. So let us know in comments. And Erica, so could you, I don't know if it's easier to just talk about your typical week as a producer or just a general overview what theater producers do, and maybe compared to film producers, if that's an easier way. So however you want to describe what you do would be great.
Awesome. I will say I am so sad that I can't see the answers to all of these amazing draw questions because I'm dying to know the answers. Julia, you might have to feed me some of the really good ones. And
for sure.
Apologies because you're listening to the streets of the Upper West Side, apparently with that loud honk just then.
Yeah. Parts of living in New York, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay, so what does a producer do? Okay, so I'm going to start by defining what a lead producer does, especially since I described myself as having lead produced a project. So the lead producer of a project, the best way to describe it is as follows. Every new show is actually its own startup. It's like its own new business, and the lead producer is the CEO. The lead producer is the one who is running the ship, who is responsible for raising all of the money and keeping the business financially solvent, and also responsible for making all the hiring decisions and overseeing the top level strategy for the business. There are, because a lot of what we teach in the Business of Broadway is how to become involved in producing. And so I do feel it's important to talk about the fact that that isn't the only way to be a producer, is to be a lead producer. When you look at a playbill, and you see all of those names above the title listed as producers on a playbill, the first couple names, sometimes there's only one lead producer, sometimes there's as many as like 5 lead producers, but the first couple names you see all the way at the top, those are the lead producers. And everyone else who's listed on that page, they're what's known as co-producers. So they're people who, the lead producer is responsible for raising all of the money that it'll take to produce the show. So for a musical nowadays, that ranges in like the $15 to $20 million range, right? Like it's very expensive and sometimes much higher than that, depending on the scale of the musical. A play you can usually do in more of like the $3 to $6 million range, depending on the size of the play. But the lead producer is responsible for raising all of that money. Co-producers are producers who have raised their hands and said to the lead producer, I will take some of the responsibility of raising this money off of your plate, and I will commit to either write a check myself or to go away and raise a quote unquote significant portion of the funding that you need. Now, the definition of a significant portion is actually decided by the lead producer, but there are some sort of industry norms. Like usually the threshold for co-producer credit is either $125,000 or $250,000, depending on the show and whether it's a play or a musical. So anyone who raises their hand and says, I will raise or invest $250,000 or more, one of the perks they might get for taking that responsibility off the shoulders of the lead producer is getting to have their name above the title on the playbill. There's a number of other perks they get as well. And so they themselves are also producers of that piece, even though they aren't the lead producers. And then needless to say, there's also many, many, many people who write checks who didn't necessarily themselves write a check for or raise a quote unquote significant portion, didn't hit that threshold. And those are all of the investors in the project. And one of the reasons why having your name above the title in that way is a very big incentive and a very big perk is because anyone whose name is above the title on the playbill on opening night of that production, if that show is nominated for or wins a Tony, like for best musical or best play or best revival, then you yourself are considered a Tony nominated or a Tony winning producer by virtue of having had your name above the title on that play, on that piece. So that's why it's actually a very big incentive. So that's what a producer does. A producer, a lead producer is the CEO, is running the ship. They have a very, 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 very big team of very capable individuals, all with different specialized skills who help run that ship. No producer, no show happens on the creative side or on the administrative side without a massive team of individuals who are all incredibly skilled in different specialized ways. But the lead producer is the one heading that team and running that ship. And then co-producers are all those individuals who either write a check themselves or raise a significant portion of funds. It's worth noting that just like co-producers, lead producers aren't actually required to put any of their own money in a show. So you can be a co-producer or a lead producer, and you don't need to be someone who yourself could write a 5-figure check or a 6-figure check. You just need to have access to individuals who can. You need to feel as though you can find that money. That was a completely different way of answering the question than like comparing it to film. So if you have any follow-up questions you want to answer, Julia, I'm happy to answer them. But that's how we talk about it at Bob. And that feels like the sort of baseline understanding of the ways to, what does a producer do and what would be the different access points to get into it.
That's actually super interesting. And I do have follow-up questions. I just want to address those watching right now. As always, yes, sending messages, private messages is fine too if you're not comfortable for some reason commenting publicly. I see all of your messages, or at least I try to. So you can ask questions via messages or comments, whatever is easiest for you. And yes, you can enter the draw via messages as well. I do prefer if you put them down in comments if you can. It's easier to just look at everybody right there. But if you're not comfortable doing that, that's fine. So let me ask.
I think we need to pause for a second and just have a moment of celebration for Julia, who has an entire command center happening over there, where she is keeping track of our Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, private messages. I am endlessly impressed. I think you are incredible.
Well, I do miss sometimes, and I have to get back to people afterwards. That's why I say just put them down in comments just in case. And I seem to add another screen every time we have a new stream. I'm like, okay, one for Facebook, one for YouTube, one for comments, one for messages. It's like I'm checking all these different ones.
This right here is producing, by the way. Everything you are doing.
Honestly, a lot of people who know me, they're like, I know you're an actress, but I can see you in the future get into producing.
Yeah, I mean, right, because when we're talking at the Broadway level or even at the off-Broadway level, the lift of raising that money is a big portion of the responsibility, right? And frankly, it can be a hurdle, can be a barrier to entry for folks who don't feel like they have access to that kind of funding, right? Or to a network who has that kind of funding. But what you are doing is no less producing. It's not producing at the Broadway level, right? But you are producing, which is you are making a thing happen and overseeing and figuring out all of the logistics that it takes to make it happen. So I praise you. I praise you in this moment.
Well, I started my producing journey with the streams, I guess.
Totally.
All right, before I forget, once again, the next question for the draw. Who is your favorite actor? And Broadway, non-Broadway, play, musical theater, film, everything's fine. Let us know and you'll get entered into the draw one more time. And Erica, a follow-up on what you said about the money. Now, do you have to know a lot of rich people pretty much if you're not rich yourself? And if so, how do you even get, like, unless you're, in the corporate world at first and then transition into the theater industry, how do you meet the rich people?
It's a great question. And it's a question we're asked all the time, right? Which is, it can feel so daunting to understand, like, how do you even get started? And you can also, apologies for my loud dog.
I hope your dog makes an appearance. We've had some dogs make an appearance on the streams, and
we can make that
they
happen.
Just stole the show.
So we can definitely make that happen. For now, my husband is just restraining him, so he's so
Okay, great.
So listen, as I said before, there's just no denying that can be a major barrier to entry, right? And it's part of why even just being able to be a co-producer and, not necessarily standing up and saying, I feel like I have the capacity to raise tens of millions of dollars, but even just saying, I feel like I have the capacity to raise $125,000, right, is a real barrier. It's a real reason why it's one of the key touch points at which access is challenging in our business, right? Because there is this, you need somehow, the short answer is, yeah, you do need to feel like you know where to find that $125,000, right? That's the short answer. The longer answer is that, Broadway does actually tend to be a kind of insular community. And so what you actually can do is start by just talking to people within the business, right? So there are some folks who are going to be very sort of resistant to sharing who their investors are or connecting you to people who have invested with them in the past. But for the most part, there is sort of this understanding of like, we're all in this pool together and we're all trying to make work happen, right? And so part of it is just talking to people, right? Like one of my business partners at Bob, Dana Lerner, she is like, there is no one like Dana when it comes to raising money. And it's not, and it's because like literally anywhere she goes, she just has the sort of bravery and the confidence to be like, this is what I'm working on right now. At any party you want to learn more, right? And even if 9 times out of 10, they just like look at her with a blank stare, they reply to you with a blank stare and they're like, why would you even ask me that question? I don't know anything about theater. Or I'm not interested in theater at all. Like, every once in a while they're like, oh, wait a minute. You're working on a musical about falling in love and getting married super quickly. My wife and I fell in love and get married super quickly. I would love to learn more about that. Right. And so part of it is just about having sort of the bravery to talk about it, which I know is a hurdle for me personally. Right. Sometimes that can feel a little like snake oil salesman, right? Like it can feel a little greasy. But the truth of the matter is that's how you start building connections and building relationships. And that is what our whole industry is based on, is relationships. And so, yes, by the time you're ready to produce, you do need to feel as though you know where to find folks who have money, right? You have made inroads, but that doesn't mean, listen, there are some of us, I am one, who was born in and raised in a network of folks who are potential theater investors. I know that is privilege, right? That is not the environment and the community in which the majority of people within our worlds grow up. And one of the ways in which I think we can open the doors for a new generation of theater makers to come start doing this work and be on the producing and business side of the table is to start sharing resources, to start helping connect folks in building new relationships. And that's, asking those questions, starting those conversations. One of the other things we often say in Bob is like, no one's ever going to be offended that you thought that they were wealthy enough to invest in a Broadway show, right? So like you can go to someone and be like, would you ever be interested in this? And if they like just totally do not have the wealth to do so, they aren't really going to be offended that you ask them, but they might know somebody else who you could ask, right? And so it really does just start with talking with people who, even if they themselves are not prospective investors, they might know people who know people who know people, and it starts becoming a web of developing relationships.
Yeah, networking is honestly, like, it goes a long way. People
Totally.
know people, like you said. So, and then once you get introduced to one rich person who loves theater, that person probably will keep, especially if they make the money back, right, on the production, they'll probably keep investing and introducing you to new people too. So that's always a good thing.
And totally, and that's where I think really it comes down to relationship, right? Like, and that's the word I like to use, because there's no question, these kinds of conversations can feel transactional. They can feel like, I need something from you, right? And if instead you focus on really developing relationship, then those become folks who are interested in investing in you and in your career. Yeah. And then maybe even if they don't get their money back, they're proud to have invested in you and the work that you do and would like to do so again.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you. Now, I know the producing is about raising money and everything, but also, like, as you mentioned, you're the CEO of the project. So as a producer, do you get to hire everyone, like their directors, and all that jazz, and then the directors will hire the actors, or how does it usually work?
I mean, the short answer is yeah, you do hire everyone. But much like casting, there's also a sense of deferring to those for whom a particular sphere is their arena, if that makes sense. So for example, right, like a director, you as the lead, as the producer, and together with the writers, right, will choose a director. But then it's the director who's really going to have the biggest say on like who is your stage manager, right, and who is your cast, and who. But as a producer, all of those individuals ultimately work for you. You are their boss. You are the person writing their paychecks. I mean, you aren't literally the person writing your paychecks. Your general manager, who is your right hand in the execution of the business, is actually writing their paychecks. But you are the person, right, who is paying them week in, week, and you are the person for whom they're working. So the short answer is yeah, you do hire everyone. But again, in the Bob School of Thought, we really think that the key to sort of successful creative collaboration and the key to successful producing is also hiring folks in leadership positions within your team who you trust, and then leaning into that trust, right? And letting them decide and bring to you, these are the folks I want to work with, and trusting their judgment unless from your objective bird's eye view, you think they're overlooking something that is important to consider before you make that hire. And that's true on both the administrative side and that whole team of folks, as well as on the creative side, like the director and all of the hires that they then have a say in, right?
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask the next draw question right now. We do have a few questions that came in live from the audience, so I'll ask those next because I promised people would get to those. So for the draw, the next question is, have you as actors, and if you're not primarily an actor, whatever it is you primarily do, have you ever appeared in another role in theater other than your primary role? So if you're an actor, have you ever, say, been a stage manager or a producer or anything else other than your primary role? And Erica, we have a few questions from Dan here, but I'll ask this one because a couple other people had the same question. So Dan is asking, how do the investors make money? Is it a flat percentage of the profit, or is it some other structure? Potential investor here, perhaps.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you for that question, Dan, and others who asked it. So I'm going to give you a brief overview that little plug we go into in more detail in our classes, but I'm happy to share here what feels like a digestible nugget in answer to that question. So the way the finances work is that any profit that you have left over, so all of the money you raise, like when you say that a show costs $15 million, that's actually the money that you need to get to opening night. Once the show is running, then week over week, you're just looking to sell enough tickets to earn enough money in ticket sales to cover your weekly costs, to cover the cost of running your show, right? It's just like any other business, right? You're selling something and you're hoping to earn enough money from those sales to cover your operations, right? So week over week, that's how sort of whether or not you have a profit is determined. Did you sell enough tickets to cover your weekly operations, to pay all those salaries, to rent all the gear, to pay for to pay your theater rent and still have money left over? If so, then you have profit, and that profit goes in the bank. Once you've accumulated enough of that profit, you might decide as the producer that you're ready to make a distribution. You're ready to pay that money out to your investors and to anyone who is a stakeholder in the business. So when you first start earning money, right, before, when you first start earning money, the first profits that are earned, when you pay that money out, 100% of that money, all of that money goes to the investors. Nobody else gets a piece of it. So if you're distributing $100, you'd never be distributing as little as $100, but let's keep it simple, right? If I'm distributing $100 and you, Dan, invested 10% of all of the money I had to raise, right? So you have a 10% stake in my show, you're going to get $10 out of that $100. The full $100 goes to investor, and you get your what's called pro rata share, which is your relative percentage of how your contribution, your investment, what it is relative to the total, to the whole, right? So if it's a $15 million musical, you, Dan, have magically given me $1.5 million and you have a 10% share, you're going to get $10 of every $100 that I distribute. And that is true that 100% of the profits go directly to investors pro rata until you hit the magical moment known as recoupment. And that's the moment when your investors have earned all of their money back. So they haven't earned any extra, they've just been made whole. Once you've hit recoupment, the whole game changes. And so, long story short, there's some additional nuance here, but the overall takeaway would be that whereas before, if I was distributing $100, all of that went to investors, now that's split 50-50. So only $50 is going to my investors and the other $50 is being kept by the lead producers. And that's when lead producers start making a killing. If a show is successful enough to hit recoupment and then keep earning profit after that. So whereas you, Dan, my $1.5 million investor, my high roller, was getting $10 for every $100 I distributed, now that $100 is being split 50-50, and you're going to get your 10% of only $50. So you're only getting $5 now. There are some additional nuance. There are some other people who participate in that $100 when you're in post-recoupment land. It's like one step more complicated than the way I described it to you. But that's the basic foundations of how investors get their money back and then earn a profit thereafter.
All right. I didn't know that. I totally thought it's like, just you get a certain percentage, but it's like a whole setup of things that happen.
Oh yeah, totally. We have lots of, we've actually spent a lot of the last year like refining how we teach, because the Producing 101 curriculum was the first one we developed. And so we continue to sort of like refine it and try to, perfect the things that we do. And we eventually were just like, this is so complicated. We need to just like make a diagram, right? Like you kind of got to like watch the money flow through the pyramid in order to understand how this all works.
And I'm assuming there are multiple contracts for all of this stuff.
Yeah,
when.
Totally. I mean, the short story is that when you make an investment in a show, in a Broadway show, in any commercial for-profit theater production, you're going to get a huge packet of documentation that is it's called the operating agreement. The operating agreement is like a 40 to 50 page legal document that outlines everything about how the show is going to operate for you as an investor in that show, as someone who's taking a stake in that show, including how the money will flow back to you. It's all outlined in that big legal document that you review and you sign to memorialize your investment.
Now, is the lead producer kind of the same thing as an executive producer?
So this is where these terms are actually used differently in theater than in film. In theater, the lead producer is that CEO. The lead producer is as I described it. And an executive producer is someone who a lead producer might hire, but not necessarily. In theater, an executive producer is not a given. It's someone a lead producer might hire to actually take on some of the day-to-day responsibility of running the ship. So, and like, you might ask, well, why would they do that? It might just be that they're really busy, right? And they feel they need some support doing the work of running the ship. It also happens sometimes that, let's say, as a lead producer, you're actually either new to the industry or this is your first lead producing position. And so you actually hire an executive producer who has been working in the industry for a long time, who you feel like perhaps has expertise and or relationships that maybe you don't, to complement the skill set that you bring to the table. But that in theater, that's the relationship between a lead producer and an executive producer.
Now we had another question from both actually Dan and Jennifer asked it, and somebody else, I believe, Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all three of you asked similar things. So I don't, I guess you mostly do theater, but are you able to maybe mention a few points how theater producing is similar to or different from film producing?
I have to be honest. I'm not the expert on this conversation. I have had it taught to me a few times, but I also am going to admit that over the last 18 months of COVID, a little less than 18 months, but I feel like a lot of the knowledge that just sort of lived in my brain has like gone dormant for lack of use. So I don't feel like I can offer sort of real detail. Here's what I can say. At the end of the day, the job is actually exactly the same, right? The job is to find the money, and the job is to make the project happen and hire. And that involves hiring a big team of folks, all of whom have specialized experience to help you with the job of making that project happen, right? So at the end of the day, fundamentally, the project is the same. Or the work of a producer, right? And the what it means to step into a producer role, a lead producer role, is the same. The language is a little different, right? There tends to be a little bit more of a division between where the money comes from and where the day-to-day leadership happens in the film world, forgive me. Whereas in theater, those two things are a little more centralized within, one set of people. And the financial model, like how you make your money back, is completely different in film. Again, I'm not the person to teach it to you. But foundationally, what the role of a producer is sort of the same everywhere, right? Just like I was talking about with Julia and the work she's doing here, right? It's having the vision for the thing, and it's making the thing happen. And if money is needed to make the thing happen, it's finding that money. Right? That's the job of a producer, regardless of the arena in which you are producing.
Yeah. Well, I assumed so because you do specialize in theater, but I thought I'd ask anyway. But no, hey, now I guess I have to find a film producer to do one of these streams. Great.
Well, hopefully, if all goes according to plan, maybe by this time next year, I can talk more educatedly about these things, because perhaps I will have worked on a project that is in development by then. But at the moment, I can't say that I've done it in order to sort of share personal anecdote experience about the differences.
Yeah. And we usually, for these streams, we do film separate from theater anyway, because there are so many questions people ask. And like, sense. Film versus theater acting and stuff like that. So I'll do my best to get someone out here to talk about film producing too at some point, or have Erica back in a year.
Sounds perfect.
Great. Now, next question for the draw. Let me see, which one did I think was an interesting one? Well, let's make this fun. Does anyone on the stream know any people who want to be investors in theater? And it's just a yes or no answer. I just asking for a friend if anybody knows any rich people. Hint, hint. Well, let us know and you'll get entered into the draw. And for Erica, we have another question from Roger. Let me see. Roger, where are you? Okay. Okay, so Roger is asking, what, from your point of view, is the most important quality in a producer?
I feel like I have two different answers to this question, Roger. Thanks for that question, because it made me sigh and think. I have two different answers to that question. I think if you just like fundamentally want to talk about like what are the skills required to be a producer, I think vision and organization are probably two of the top key qualities, right? You need to have a marriage of being able to dream, being able to have vision, being able to sort of see something and imagine all of the things it could be and what the right strategic path might be for that project or that live stream, right? You need to have an inspiration and a vision for what you can build something into. And then you also need to have the organizational skills to actually bring that vision to life. Now, as a lead producer, you might not actually possess both of those things, right? You might be more of a visionary than you are an executor. And if you are, then maybe you will have a producing partner who brings that complementary set of skills to the table, or maybe you'll hire an executive producer and they will sort of take care of the organizational execution side of helping bring your vision into life. But those are sort of the two foundational elements that are needed. in order to just make it right, to even be Julia and be like, these are conversations that actors deserve to hear. Let's make them happen, right? Those are the two skills you need to possess. The reason I said it's a twofold answer for me is because today, I think that the number one skill that people who are working as leaders within our industry need to lead into. So this is less about what are the skills you need to become a leader and more what I think we are currently missing as leaders within our business is leading into radical transparency and honesty, is a real leaning into a willingness to talk to everyone on your team, whether they identify as a business person or an artist, whatever role they may fill within your team or on your production, a willingness to talk with them candidly and honestly about what went into a decision. What are the financial implications that you are up against, right? Rather than holding that information close to the chest and feeling like just because you have said it is so, that should be enough. That is something I personally am really trying to lean into. And anytime, listen, I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to pretend that I don't often experience that knee-jerk instinct not to provide the full answer and to hold the information close to my chest. I do. Right? Part of it is no doubt my whiteness. Part of it is having grown up in the business in the way that it is always historically operated. Right? And I'm working really hard to identify, interrogate, and reverse that instinct when I see it coming up in me, because I think the way that we are going to build a better industry model, a more equitable industry, all relies on our willingness to talk to one another and treat everyone in the room as equal collaborators.
I love that. Love it. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody watching, we only have about 15 minutes left of the stream. I called this 1 hour series for a reason, because when we started, we were going for like 2 or 3 hours and it never stopped. So now it's just 1 hour. And if you have any more questions, put them down in comments. Some of the questions that I see here are not exactly relevant to producing. So I see the questions that you guys are asking. And if they're not answered right now, that means I'm putting them down for other streams that are more, relevant towards that specific question versus the producing. So no worries, I still see you. And let's see what the next draw question. I just want to say this. Everybody who thinks that Erica is awesome, can you comment Erica's awesome?
Oh, Julia.
Because I am enjoying this a lot, and I just have to. I can't comment, but I was going to say if I could comment, I would, but totally think you're awesome. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, these streams, honestly, every time I have a stream guest, I don't know if it's the type of people that agree to do these streams are just like the nicest people ever or what. But every time I do a stream, I'm like, oh my God, I'm feeling great.
Thank you for that wonderful compliment.
All right, so once again, for the draw, if you think Erica is awesome, let us know in the comments. And Erica, next question we have from, I believe it's Anna or Anna, I'm not sure, forgive me if I'm pronouncing your names wrong. Anna's asking, what is the most difficult problem in the production of theater that you have ever had to solve?
Oh my God.
Or maybe some problems that arise for producers.
I was going to say, here's the secret about producing. It's just an endless barrage of problems. Your job as a producer is really to be, especially, it's one thing when you're in sort of like the earlier development stages of a piece, but once you're sort of in production and moving into sort of putting a thing on its feet, there is literally the job of a producer is to be ready for nothing to go as planned and everything to go wrong, and to be able to roll with the punches. I'm going to provide an example from one of the things that I did on behalf of Broadway Across America as an in-house producer there was produce a biannual conference that BAA hosts for theater industry professionals. So the leaders of the New York industry get together every other year for a conference that's hosted by Broadway across America. And we showed up at a bar in Key West to do a performance of Motown. It was a performance, Motown, the cast of Motown had flown down to do a performance as one of our evening entertainment as part of this conference. And we showed up at this bar where we were meant to do the performance, and nothing worked. Like literally nothing worked. Like it was as though there was no power. And it was one of those situations where, you know, the woman for whom I was working, Jennifer Costello, who is a mentor and dear friend, she and I, as the producers of this event, were running around like headless chickens with everyone on our team, doing everything from hanging lights ourselves to, I literally found myself like in a DJ booth of the bar, touching every single button until I could figure out how to make the video screens turn on. And it was one of those nail-biting experiences where our guests at this conference, who, you know, were provided a really wonderful time, had dinner somewhere else in downtown Key West, and then were being paraded with music down Duval Street to this bar where they were going to be entertained by Motown. And literally it wasn't until we heard the parade down the block and like guests were about to walk in the venue that all of a sudden I hit the right button and everything turned on and we were like, okay, I think we have a show. So yeah, and that kind of stuff is just par for the course.
Oh man. Yeah, sounds exactly like every time I try to organize like a concert or a show, obviously not on such a big scale as you do, but still it's like.
It's all the same. There's no downplaying it, Julia. It's all the same.
Yeah, and then having people like not respond to your messages or being disorganized or saying, yeah, I'll do it, and they never do it. It just drives me crazy. I don't know how you do it every day.
It does that kind of fortitude, like a willingness to be the person who, when things inevitably don't go exactly as planned, you can sort of not totally lose it and be the person who finds the solution. That is definitely, you know, I think it was Roger who asked the question about the skills, right? Yeah. You know, the list grows, right? I could answer that question forever, but that's also definitely one of the prerequisites. Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, right? At the end of the day, if things aren't happening right, everyone's just going to look to you. At the end of the day, you're the final person to be held accountable, right? And so you got to be ready to be the one with the solution.
All right. So before I ask the next question from Cassie, I just want to ask the draw question. Let's think. And before I do that, I just want to give a shout out to a couple of people. Deanna's saying for the draw, Erica is freaking awesome. Smiley face. And Cassie also said, she messaged me, but she said, Erica is the awesomest. Awesome. I can't even pronounce the awesomest.
Thank you so much, friends.
And I'm sure there are more Julia, that I'm not seeing right now, but.
This is unrehearsed, but could I ask the next draw question?
Yeah.
All right. I'm curious to know if you could, in a world where you had the money and that was not a consideration, right? This is the lovely world where you could have done anything you wanted. If you could have invested in one Broadway show, what would it have been?
Oh man. Right away I'm like thinking what I would.
Well, it'll be like, I'm really curious to see how many like Hamiltons there are, because obviously it was very financially successful. Yeah. Or how many people choose a show that like, there's no wrong answers here. I don't say this because there's any judgment about which way you go, but I'm curious to see how many like Hamiltons and Lion Kings there are versus like shows that people clearly have chosen because they loved it, even if it wasn't necessarily hugely financially successful.
Yeah. And I mean, now that people know how successful each show was, they can be like, oh yeah, if I could turn back time, I would totally invest in like Phantom of the Opera.
Right, exactly. Totally, right? It's not only do you have all the money in the world in this scenario, but you also already know how it did. Right? Whether the show was successful.
It's like get a time machine, invest in all the successful shows. Correct. Done, you're rich. All right. Before we run out of time, let me ask another question. Well, this one I actually also was curious. So I was going to ask that as a follow-up as well, but a couple of people asked similar things. So I see you guys asking the question. I'm just going to read the way I have it phrased right here, but I think everybody's question will be answered with this. So have you ever had to fire someone from a project because they weren't the correct fit, or they just like pissed you off?
Yes, of course. I mean, right, talking about how everything is about fit or forgive me, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about how everything is about challenges. That's what I meant to say. Is that, thank you for giving me a beat to course correct. Right, and how there's just, part of the job is taking it as it comes. Mm-hmm. It's inevitable, right? When you I think one of the most stressful things about being in the early stages of a project is that every person you hire feels like a very big, important decision, right? And that might start as early as who you're going to hire to write the thing, right? But maybe this is a piece that has come to you as a producer after, writers are already attached to it, or writers have already written it, right? So it's not actually, you don't have to decide who will write the thing, but then you have to decide who will direct the thing, and who's the right choreographer, and who's the right designer, and who's the right, every one of those creative decisions, and also the business decisions, right? Who's going to do your marketing? Who's going to oversee your advertising, right? All of these decisions feel like if you choose wrong, the whole piece could get waylaid, right? Like, I've worked on a project that up until its last rehearsal, it opened on Broadway. I won't name what show it was, but it opened on Broadway. And up until the last rehearsal for Broadway, in the rehearsal studio, we were all just like, oh my God, the music, it's so perfect, right? And in the rehearsal room, it was just like piano, maybe drums, right? And then all of a sudden we moved into the theater and the band was introduced. And it became clear that while the orchestrations, right, while the arrangements for the band were beautiful, they actually weren't helping the story, right? All of a sudden, this story that was really clear and this music that was really powerful, all of a sudden you layered on these orchestrations and it wasn't working anymore. And at that point, you're very late in the game, right? You can't, you can certainly during your preview window before opening night continue to refine the orchestrations and provide feedback, but there's only so much you can do at that point in time, right? And the big challenge about musicals in particular, because there are so many moving parts, but really any project, is knowing that like things could be going great until you add that one new design element, and all of a sudden it makes the things that were working before no longer work. And so it definitely happens that I have worked on projects where I have had to part ways with people because, our visions weren't aligned, or because, frankly, I didn't have any problem with them, but it was clear to me that the artists with whom they were working, they were not all aligned within their vision. And so as a team, there was not alignment and coalescence, even if I personally wasn't unhappy with their work. And frankly, I think the key to that moment is, once again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but honesty, right? It's sharing candidly why you've arrived at this moment, what it is you're grateful to that individual for, but also why you feel as though you need to part ways in this way. And honoring their humanity and their emotional experience of that moment. And knowing that ultimately everyone's going to be okay and move on, right? I will say that in theater, one of the things you have to think about, though, is rights. Because, for example, if you were working with a set designer and you decided that the relationship wasn't working and this wasn't the right set designer for the project, and you decided to part ways with that individual, if you had already reached a point where they had provided some drawings, or they had already provided some set pieces, or let's say you'd done an out-of-town production and you decided to part ways with them before moving to Broadway, if you wanted to use some of their designs and some of their creations, those belong to the designer. So you actually are going to need to have an ongoing agreement with the designer to use their work product, and they will actually continue to get compensated from the project. Because in order to use their creative work product, you have to pay them for the rights to do so. So that is something to consider, right? That there's almost no such thing in the theater world as like a clean break with an artist unless you don't have any intention of using any of their work product hereafter.
And speaking of copyright, we will have a lawyer on one of these streams in July. So stay
Awesome.
tuned for that. We do have more of these streams coming up. Also, stay tuned. I am trying to schedule a lot of them at the same time. So in case you don't see anything upcoming, don't worry. They will be. I usually don't schedule them until like a week before anyway. So we have some exciting guests coming, next week, hopefully, if not the weeks after. And Erica, this was amazing. Thank you so much. We are pretty much out of time, unfortunately.
I can't believe how fast that went by.
Yes, I know, when you're having fun,
Thank you, Julia, and thank you to everyone who asked all of those really insightful and thoughtful questions. I'm really grateful for it.
I just want to ask one more question because it's about the courses, and I want people to hear. I'm pretty sure everybody probably has the exact same question. But
you're the best.
But a couple of people were asking, but I see Anna's question right here. Are the courses currently on Zoom, or do you have to be in New York, or how does it work?
We are still teaching on Zoom, and frankly, we plan to for the foreseeable future, because we love that Zoom allows participants and students from frankly all over the globe. We've had people join us. We teach, all of our classes are at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we've had students join us from other continents where it's like the middle of the night where they are, and they've stayed up just to join our class, which is like the hugest compliment I could imagine. And so we really love that teaching digitally has allowed for that access, the accessibility. So for this, as far as I can see forward, we plan to continue teaching on Zoom. And if that changes, we'll certainly make an announcement on our website, so that's clear which classes are in person and which classes are digital. But any classes that are currently on the website are in fact digital and taught via Zoom.
Okay, perfect. So is it kind of an interactive experience, or is it more like a webinar where you can only see the teachers and then people can ask questions?
There's no question that for the bulk of the evening, we're talking at you, right? Like we're teaching, because our goal here is, we try to keep the cost accessible as well, but our goal here is for you to get your money's worth and to learn as much as you can in the window of time that we're together. So there's no question that for the majority of the evening, we are sort of talking at you, if you will, but we do keep it we limit the classes to 15 to 20 participants depending on the class. And we do keep it in Zoom format where everybody can see each other and questions can be asked live. And we do hold a minimum of 30 minutes that in practice usually turns into more like 45 to 50 minutes for live Q&A and conversation at the end. So it does feel like we do strive to create some relational time and energy, even though we're all in these static Zoom boxes, and we are in fact like teaching with a slide deck for a good portion of the evening.
All right, perfect. So yeah, if you guys are, we've had some people from Australia watch one of our streams recently, and if you're in Australia and want to join, I mean, it's probably going to be like 6 a.m. your time, but bright and early.
Totally.
All right, and you said the classes are starting, it's at the beginning of each month, right? So
we teach Producing 101 the first week of each month, and then we usually teach one or two other classes from our sort of course catalog, if you will, each month. So for example, this month we taught Producing 101 at the start of the month. We taught Assessing and Transacting an Investment last week, and we'll teach Unions and Guilds next week. It depends on the month. And I'll also say, perhaps I should have preempted this moment by making sure that we had additional dates posted on the calendar. But I will say that we haven't yet posted our fall dates. So right now, the posted class schedule only goes through August. We will, within the next week or two, be adding all of the fall dates as well. And if you wanted to make sure that you were alerted when those were added, feel free to join our mailing list, and we'll make sure that you are included when we send out an e-blast announcing our fall dates. but they'll also just appear on the website if you come back in a week or two. And Julia, I'll just say thank you so much. Thank you for promoting the work that we're doing at Bob in this way, because it's, we're a young upstart ourselves and we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for doing the work. I didn't even know there were producing classes. I just thought people just had to figure it out on their own kind of thing. So it's
well, that is historically a lot of how it happens. Although there have always been amazing institutions doing offering education. Like, I want to give a shout out to the Commercial Theater Institute, or CTI, which has always offered classes on commercial producing. And some of my colleagues some of my fellow Bobsies have taken classes at CTI. We have all taught classes at CTI. But we felt as though there was a niche for focusing on for offering this kind of education to literally anyone who was interested, and not just necessarily people who were on a path to producing, which is what those existing curriculum tend to focus on.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so it's pretty much time for our draw, but first I would like to say, for those who would like more information, as always, after we end the stream, there's going to be an end screen with Erica's contact details, so her website and the Bob website, if you want to check those out for the courses they offer. And honestly, I went on the website and the courses are not expensive at all. They're not like, $400 per course.
That's part of our foundational goal with this business. And I'm actually realizing, Julia, I had the thought while I was answering the question about knowing folks with money and how to be an investor, be a co-producer. I had the thought, I didn't say it in the moment, and then I lost it and it just came back. But there's another organization I want to make sure to mention and uplift, which is the Industry Standard Group, TISG. And it was founded by a group of BIPOC theater makers, and they have created actually a fund intentionally designed to provide opportunity and access to BIPOC co-producers who otherwise sort of might not have been able to achieve that threshold on their own. And there's a number of incredible organizations doing work of that nature, but friends of ours have founded TISG, the Industry Standard Group, and I think they're doing incredible work. And I'll also mention TPOC, Theater Producers of Color, which is I think it's a 10-week program, but forgive me if I've gotten the exact number of weeks wrong, that is fully subsidized and specifically for aspiring producers of color. And it is like a 10-week course for aspiring producers of color to learn about producing. So I just want to uplift both of those organizations founded by friends of ours and doing incredible work to also help provide access to the producing side and education on the producing side.
That is amazing. Thank you for mentioning that too.
Of course.
There's so many organizations out there too.
I know, it's pretty amazing. I'm pretty blown away by the work that they and so many others in our cohort are doing. Yeah, it's amazing.
All right. Well, do you have any, I know you've talked a lot already and I asked you a lot of questions, but do you have any closing remarks, anything else you'd like to say if we haven't mentioned something yet?
I think Julia, you asked a really interesting question as one of the draw questions, which is like a moment that you might have, that anyone watching might have filled a role that wasn't sort of their primary role, if you will. And I think that's maybe my best parting advice is, like, be curious. Don't feel as though having identified what your primary lane is, veering out of that lane or being interested in other sides of the business is, I was about to say that in a negative way, and instead I'm going to say it in a positive way. Even having identified your primary lane or the primary hat you would like to wear, continue if there's something else you want to learn about, if there's something else you want to try out, if there's something else if there's an additional hat you want to layer on top, I encourage you to do so. I think the days of being singularly defined as artists, and by that I mean any kind of artist or theater maker or art maker, are gone. I think nowadays we don't need to ascribe to there being boundaries and limitations to how many hats we can wear and how many different things we can pursue and learn about and try our hands at and be interested in. And I encourage you to do that.
All right. I'm so sorry, but another quick question about the course, because
No
I guess people don't want to leave the video to go check out the website. That's where like please ask this. Um, but well, this is all online, available publicly anyway. So, but if you, for some reason you don't want to say, that's fine. Just let me know. How much are the courses?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to share that. So our Producing 101 is on sort of a sliding pay what you can scale. I forgive me because I'll admit that during the real heart of COVID, it was like a truly pay what you can. And now we have set sort of a minimum. I don't remember if that minimum is $25 or $30, but it's pay what you can up to $45. And the rest of our classes are $45. So those are the costs. You know, it's one at a time. So it's not like you have to make a commitment to multiple classes at once. And we would love to have you.
All right. And
I will also say we never want, I'm sorry for cutting you off, Julia, but we never want finances to be the reason someone can't take a course. So if you found that that at that level, the classes were cost prohibitive, please feel free to reach out to us.
You're literally the best. This is warming my heart. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I mean, even $45, it's so reasonable. I mean, if you take classes in New York, it's usually a lot more than that, you know. So
it's you know, we want everyone to feel welcome and that the door is open to them. That's our goal.
Awesome. Well, I think it's time for the draw now. I think I've kept you here long enough. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for another 30 seconds to a minute. So we announce the draw winner. Now, Erica, could you pick a number from 1 to, gotta scroll down to this, 1 to 53?
Oh, 53 entries. That's pretty amazing. I'm going to pick 37.
37 is, dun, 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 it's Lisa Rodriguez. Congratulations,
Yay,
Lisa. And Lisa actually messaged me, well, other than the draw questions, a couple of questions. So I apologize, Lisa. I know we didn't get to one or two of your questions. But hey, now you get to take the course. And
that's right.
and find out all that info all for yourself.
Brilliant.
All right. So Lisa, make sure to message me and I'll put you in touch with Erica. And Erica, it's, should I use the Business of Broadway email or just
you can connect Lisa and I directly and I'll take care of it. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Actually, oh, Lisa, that is so nice of you. Don't cry, Julia, don't cry. Lisa is saying that well, first of all, she said that she's away in the summer and she is also lucky enough to have a job and can afford to pay for the course. So she would like to donate her spot to, I'm gonna cry, to a performer of color. Lisa, thank you so much. This is why we do these things, and you are amazing. Now, I'm not going to ask anyone if anyone is a performer of color watching here. I am a part of a few different groups that do focus on, you know, raising the voices for performers of color and people of color in the industry. So pretty sure if I make the post there, we'll have a few people who would be interested. So Erica, might take me a couple of days to figure out who would get it, but I'll put you in touch. And thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, everybody, thank you. And our draw winner tonight is just an amazing person. This makes me want to like do good things, honestly. I'm just like, oh my God, now I want to donate my spot if I ever win anything. Yeah, this actually isn't the first time someone donated their spot. We had a couple this was a while ago, a couple other people donate their spots as well. So it's not only the people who do these streams, but also the people who watch these streams that are amazing. I love you all, guys. And thank you so much, Erica, for this.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you. You really are all amazing.
All right. Well, everybody watching, thank you for watching, and tune in again for our future streams coming right up. I'll be setting those up as soon as possible. Thank you again, Erica, and good night, everyone.
Good night.